Hey folks, and welcome back. I'm super excited to share this video today with you. Now, in case you've been living under a rock, Old Hammer is everywhere. Again. Now, I never played Warhammer Fantasy Battles, but I did play Mordheim, and during that time period, those really funky looking old school models were everywhere, and I have a lot of love for them. So seeing all of them being painted up on YouTube got me incredibly nostalgic for those old days of model painting. So I checked out some of my favorite websites for buying used older models, and one of them just happened to have some Mordheim minis in stock. Not just that, but Mordheim minis that are actually in their original packaging. Kind of. I don't know what happened there. I don't know. It's close enough. Today I'm going to paint up these Reiklander Youngbloods and add them to my warband. I actually started a Mordheim warband a little while ago, and it just kind of got put on the shelf to work on other projects. I'm sure you all know what that's like, but today I'm going to get it back off the shelf, get these Youngbloods painted up and added to it. Let's get started. The Mordheim warband I've been working on is a group of Reiklander mercenaries, which makes these Youngbloods perfect to fit in with them. Now, when I started working on this warband, I put together a color scheme for the entire group, which included a universal highlight color and a universal shadow. And luckily, I was also smart enough to know that I probably wasn't going to finish the group all at once, and so I wrote the color scheme down. That's something I definitely recommend to you if you're doing a big group of models like this. Just write your scheme down. It doesn't take long, and you'll thank yourself later. If you're not familiar with Mordheim, these Youngbloods are supposed to be sort of new, inexperienced members of your warband, fresh-faced recruits who are not yet accustomed to how hard life is in the City of the Damned. And there's just something really charming about these older metal models. Now, no doubt part of that is just nostalgia since they're from my childhood. I can cop to that. But for me, this is also a nicer level of detail to paint. Sure, they've got bags and belts and all of that still, but the designs are simple and clean, and there's just a lot of character in them. This is the color scheme for my warband. It's based on Vallejo Dark Sea Blue and Citadel's Averland Sunset. My universal highlight is pale sand, and my universal shadow is rubber black. So what does that mean? Well, it means that any colors I'm highlighting up on the model, I mix pale sand in with the color to get the highlight. And similarly, if I want a darker shadow, I mix rubber black in with the original paint to get them. I also picked just one color for leather and just one for cloth, and so on. By not deviating from this and by using the universal highlight and shadow, I can make sure the models all look like they belong together. I started with a contrast skin tone over a Zenithal Prime, but I decided later that just didn't fit with the rest of the warband and actually redid this first step. Mistakes happen, but it's a good placeholder for now. The cloth hat of one Youngblood and the shirt of the other get started with a light blue-gray that I've been using for a lot of the fabric in the warband. And just like I implied earlier, when that's dry, I mix in a few highlights of pale sand in stages. The first highlight covers most of the top-facing areas of the mini. The next is a little lighter and covers just a little bit less, and so on. The last highlight is either an edge highlight in the case of the hat, or done with sketchy, light brush strokes just to try to lend some texture to the material in the case of the shirt. The other shirt I want to be a light linen color, so in order to do that I just take pale sand on its own and paint over the shirt. That way it still fits the scheme and tone of the warband, and even though I'm not using that plain white linen anywhere else, it shouldn't stand out as being out of place when it's done. To give it some shadows though, I wash it with a very watered down Army Painter soft tone. Then I come back in with pale sand and re-establish all the highlights. Both of our fresh-faced young recruits are starting with dark sea blue for their pants, and I just repeat the process from earlier. a base coat, a first highlight mixed with pale sand on the top facing areas, and a second sketchier highlight that's just a little bit lighter and a little bit smaller. Now, I know it can seem daunting figuring out where to place highlights, but it doesn't have to be perfect. You can always repaint it later if you decide you want to. But to be honest, I don't usually do that. If there's one thing that's true in this hobby, it's that there's always a next time, a next model, a next chance to get it right. So don't let fear of messing something up stop you from trying. Just go for it. As you can see, I also painted one of them having half of his trousers in the other main color of the warband. Again, I didn't know if that would work out, but I just went for it. And I think it ends up looking really good. It makes him fit in more with the other models, while still looking like he's new. He doesn't have any of the fancy slashed silks of the more senior mercenaries. So what about all these other details on the minis? The ropes, the bags, the leather belts, and all the other assorted goodies. In order to make sure none of them clash or seem at odds with the color scheme, I mix the colors for these using what's already on the palette. Whatever I already have out just gets mixed together until I find a color I like well enough for each item. And that even includes the hair colors on the minis. Sure, I could go through and pick out individual paints for everything, but there's really no point. Using what I have already is simpler, easier, and by intentionally limiting my color palette, I can make sure the entire warband looks consistent even if they were painted months apart. While I get those little details highlighted, I'd like to take a moment to thank my patrons, especially my Terrain tier patron Amanda Chisholm. Your support for the channel really does mean everything, and it allows me to pick up cool models like these ones. Thank you. I'd also like to take a moment to recommend everyone check out the website I purchased these from, teasingminis.com. They're linked below if you'd like to do that. This is not a sponsored video, I just think it's a cool independent hobby store. I do a lot of shopping there, and because they also buy and sell used miniatures, you can find a lot of cool stuff there that you might not get anywhere else. So check them out. The metals for my warband are a mix of copper and steel, so I just carefully pick out all of the weapons and armor pieces with those, including the helmet that one of them is holding under his arm instead of wearing. Maybe they used the helmet to give him that bowl cut and now he resents it. Any part that's done in copper also gets a bit of weathering with Vallejo Verdigris effect paint. This is really simple to use, just sort of dab it on anywhere that looks like water might pool, in recessed and low areas and around rivets. These are the areas that are going to get weathered and collect verdigris quickest. Aside from the bases, which I'll do when I finish the whole warband, that leaves the models pretty much finished. And here they are. When I bought these minis, I was really hoping for that kind of childhood hit of nostalgia, and that's exactly what I got from them. They're simple, fun to paint, and there's just so much character in them. With Warhammer Fantasy back on the rise, it's great to see all these older models getting some love. What do you folks think? Do you like the older metal models, or are you all about the hot new resin minis or Seocast? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I think they all have their upsides, but painting these Youngbloods and adding them to my warband was an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for watching. If you've liked the video, please hit like and subscribe or share it with your friends. Those all help tremendously. If you want to go the extra mile, please go ahead and check out the links below for Patreon or buymeacoffee.com, or go visit my friends at Teasing Minis and show them some love instead. There's more content on the way, and I'll see you all in the next one.